with high oil prices, all manner of individuals, scientific, economic, political, social, have come out of the woodwork, have emerged, and the debate over energy policy and science is now incredibly rich. It's certainly as rich as it was in the days after, during and after the OPEC crisis in the United States. And if you believe the forecast by the majority, but not all of the economists, there's a fundamental difference today than there was in the 70s. That when the oil prices ran up in the 70s, everyone, no matter how crazed they were by the short-term crisis and the politics, recognized that to a large extent that price run-up was politically driven. The run-up we're seeing now, while certainly has politics as part of the story, is driven by a much broader set of factors. There's much more competition for those resources. There's a dwindling supply, in some sense, of those resources. And so in Tom Friedman's words, this is not your mother and father's energy crisis. This is a fundamentally different one. And whether we think oil prices will drop down to some degree or not, the overriding consensus is it will not drop down again to the 20, 30, perhaps even $40 or $50 per barrel range. I think we're much more likely to see $150 per barrel than we are ever to see $50 a barrel again. Without strong policy, what high energy prices do is they may make a few individual and some small groups of companies and individuals who have made a good play in the wind industry or the solar or burying carbon sequestration. It may make some individual millionaires and billionaires, but it doesn't fundamentally change the economy. It doesn't fundamentally change the problems we're talking about here in terms of the impact on the planet that is going to swamp any of the economic effects we talked about, whether oil is $99 a barrel or 105 or 80. That's minor compared to the economic costs, the immigration costs, the social costs of the environmental problems that we're setting up for ourselves. So one example I've chosen from North America, not a Mexico or US example to keep it, maybe the temperature down on it, and that is strip mines like this. This one is in Alberta. This is a tar sand strip mine. And there's more oil in the ground in Alberta than there is in Saudi Arabia in this solid form. It's basically 10% of the soil is oil by weight, and it is so full of pollutants that to separate out the usable oil, the piles of sulfur that are piling up at the site in Alberta are these, a little dark in this picture, but they're these huge pyramids of sulfur to get rid of all the pollutants so they can now send the oil to the United States. So Alberta is now sending 1 million barrels of oil to the United States. And that wouldn't have happened when oil was $40 or even $50 a barrel, because it took $30 a barrel to separate out this dirt, this tar sands into oil. And if we ever get through burning up this oil in Alberta, there's a harder to get at but equally large supply in Venezuela. So we've just discovered 2 additional Saudi Arabias essentially out there just by doing it on paper. And the reason why this is a worry is that high oil prices make these sorts of technologies and these sorts of supplies much more accessible, and these are much easier to bring to the economy than is large amounts of wind power or solar, no matter how attractive those resources are. So policy is going to be the place where we win or lose the global warming battle. It's not going to be waiting for a wonderful scientist or engineer to come up with cold fusion or the magic battery or magic wind turbine. It's going to be a policy battle, first and foremost.
The third challenge that I'm going to speak about is a very specific topic. Today, there are sufficient elements to think that we share transboundary reservoirs with the United States and the Gulf of Mexico. Now, this is a very interesting problem because it does involve the US-Mexico relation, and it poses the question of 2 countries that share a natural resource and that confronts the deep legal and business differences between Mexico and the United States. We have one natural resource crossing the US and Mexico border. So what do? If we have a migrant fluid resource going from one side to the other side of the border, which law do we apply on it? Which contractual scheme do we apply for its exploitation? Who's going to exploit it? How are we going to market it? It really forces Mexico and the US to think of an integrated policy for those transboundary reservoirs.
In this energy or oil issue is that Pemex has no technology, for example, for going to deep water, and that Pemex has no resources. I myself and others have the position that there are resources for Pemex if the fiscal policy is changed. There's this surplus resources that come from the difference in prices of oil. There's, I don't know, superávit primario, una retención.
Surplus, primary surplus.
Yes, the finance ministry retains resources from Pemex and prohibits Pemex to invest resources that are from Pemex. So if we liberate those resources, if we liberate this surplus between prices, and if Pemex would be treated fiscally as any other productive enterprise, just in 2007, Pemex could have disposed of about $35 billion that were transferred or used as fiscal resources by the state. So those that have my position in this issue consider that there are resources to invest and that Pemex can have access to any technology in deep or very deep waters or in any other any other industrial process